So after the Miami Heat's humiliating loss last night to the Thomas Bryant-led Cavaliers, the honeymoon phase of this exciting, fast-paced Miami Heat team is unfortunately finally over, which means that it's time to break out my old friend, the trade machine, baby. Nah, I'm just kidding. Relax, all right? Last night's bad loss doesn't change my overall opinion that this will be a very good Miami Heat team, at least in the regular season, but there still is some very glaring holes on the roster. As good as Davion Mitchell and Drew Smith have been, we've seen a lot of games like last night where the turnovers just pile up because we don't have a true facilitator to run the show. And pretty much all season, all of the last few seasons really, the Heat have gotten killed on the offensive glass because Jovic is not a true big man, Khalil Ware is improving but inconsistent, and Bam Adebayo has always been a solid rebounder. But as we're seeing right now with his injury, this Heat team just doesn't have a lot of depth in terms of their power rotation. Fortunately, however, there is two pretty big names that have been heating up on the trade market that I think could potentially plug these holes really well for the Miami Heat. And now I think it's time that I finally address them. But first, let's get a couple of obvious things out the way, right? Number one, we all know I'm talking about Ja Morant and Anthony Davis. And number two, we're all well aware at this point that these once unanimous superstars now carry major concerns, mostly regarding their health and availability. And truthfully, while these concerns don't make me all that excited about either trade candidate, their recent enough superstar status is still enough to at least intrigue me and worthy of diving further into in this video. Because even as of today, FanDuel, the sponsor of today's video, has Ja Morant with the 21st best odds to win MVP, and they have Anthony Davis with the 6th best odds to win Defensive Player of the Year. Of course, Miami's hot start to this season has drastically decreased my desperation and desire to go whale hunting, but there still is a lot of unknowns regarding this roster construction, including how will Tyler Herro impact our early success when he returns, and also what the hell is going on with Terry Rozier. I do believe that Tyler Herro is a great player, he's an excellent scorer, and he certainly will help this Miami Heat team, particularly in the half-court offense when the game slows down in clutch time. But I also believe that considering this Heat team currently leads the NBA at 125 points per game, I don't believe that we need Tyler Herro. I think he could help, but because he's an offensive guy and we haven't really been struggling with offense, I just don't think that we absolutely need him. And for that reason, I can't justify giving him the max extension that he's hoping for. So for that reason, I would understand why the Miami Heat may be willing to move off of Tyler Herro. And about Terry Rozier, well, the NBA is continually screwing the Miami Heat in more ways than one, including not allowing us to use his expiring $26 million contract in a deal. However, that situation does remain fluid, so for the purpose of this video, I'm going to assume that eventually the NBA will allow the Heat to use Terry's contract to facilitate a trade. Let's start with Ja Morant, where the trade that I've been seeing going around is something along the lines of this, where the Miami Heat will get Ja Morant and send over Tyler Herro and some sort of salary filler to the Memphis Grizzlies. Here I have it being Kashad Johnson, but it could also be a trade exception among other things. I've seen variations of this trade that have the Heat throwing in Khalil Ware or multiple first-round picks, and I just think that's ridiculous. I would never do that, but a straight-up Ja Morant for Tyler Herro swap, that's something that I would at least ponder. Ja Morant does have a very interesting contract situation where right now he's making about $39.5 million this season. He'll be making $42 million the following season. And then at the age of 28 years old, he'll be making about $45 million just a couple of seasons from now. Of course, with Ja Morant's recent play, this current contract is a wild overpay. But if he can get close to being the 2023 version of himself, this would just be incredible value, especially when you consider that Tyler Herro this offseason will be seeking a 4-year, $207 million extension, which comes to about $52 million per year. Now, just because Herro will be asking for that money doesn't mean that he'll get it. I understand that. Pat Riley has already shared his concerns about giving Herro a max contract. That's why they didn't get an extension done this previous offseason. But the point is, if that's the money that Herro wants and the Miami Heat are going to be unwilling to give it to him, well, then maybe they are better off trading him. Because I do think that Herro could potentially get that money elsewhere, which maybe means that he'll be looking to get traded. Maybe he'll be looking to go elsewhere where he can get the money that he wants. And if that's the case, well, then the Heat are better off trading Tyler Herro right now while you still have some leverage because he is under contract for next season. Both Herro and Morant will be 26 in January, so they're still both relatively young, but I think I can undoubtedly say that at their peaks thus far in their young careers, I think Ja Morant has been the better player. I understand there's on-court fit concerns because Ja is nowhere near the level of shooter that Tyler Herro is. I also understand that Ja's game won't age as well because of it, but peak for peak, I think Ja Morant has been the better player. So if you can get the guy who's been a better player and for less money per year, or at least in the 2027-2028 season, I think that's a win. You know, of course, admittedly, we're making a ton of assumptions here because I have no idea how good a player Ja Morant can be or can get back to being. His scoring numbers have dropped really steadily over the last 4 seasons. I've seen some daunting stats regarding his decrease in drives per game over the last few years, and his efficiency this season has been straight up awful. 35% from the field, 17% from 3 on about 6 attempts. He hasn't been good. And of course, the injuries on top of that may have contributed to this decrease in production, but they'll always be a major concern just because of his reckless play style. I mean, he hasn't played over 65 games since his rookie season. And then there's the obvious off-the-court concerns thrown on top of that. And truthfully, right now, it does appear that he quit on his team, very reminiscent of my guy, Jimmy Butler over there. Well, actually, it's not reminiscent at all. It's the exact same thing because Ja Morant literally said that he lost his joy. So I can't really see the Miami Heat wanting to take a swing on a guy who lost his joy when they just lost a guy who lost his joy. I can't see the Miami Heat wanting to do that. And also, I don't think Ja will like Miami, considering the Heat just brought in Noah LaRoche from Memphis, who instilled that fast-paced offensive system with Memphis last year and now the Heat this year. But Ja didn't like that system last year. So now all of a sudden he's going to be happy with it coming here. Like, it just doesn't make sense on any account. So after some thoughts, I don't think I would trade Tyler Herro for Ja Morant because there's just too many questions there. And for me, it's not worth the risk. And I should also mention, I don't even think Memphis would do this trade. I think they probably could get multiple picks from a team like Phoenix or Sacramento. But for Miami, even though Tyler is injured now and he's had injury problems his whole career as well, and I personally don't trust him to be the guy in the postseason, I still think he has a decent amount of trade value as someone who was just an all-star at 25 years old last season. So I would rather hold on to him as a trade chip for potentially another whale. Maybe somebody like Anthony Davis, who I think is likely on the move after the firing of Nico Harrison, who was the second worst GM in the NBA behind Joe Cronin. But anyways, we know Nico Harrison was fired. So now with him out of the way, the new regime might not feel the need to keep Anthony Davis around. So maybe we see a trade like this, where the Miami Heat receive Anthony Davis and D'Angelo Russell from the Mavericks, and in return send over Tyler Herro, Terry Rozier's expiring contract, and 1 first-round pick. I want to say that right off the bat here, I don't think Dallas would ever do this because although it's a new GM in town, as a franchise, you can't have traded Luka for essentially Tyler Herro and 2 first-round picks. But as a Heat fan, this is probably the most that I would consider. I would never consider adding in more picks or Khalil Ware like a lot of the other mock trades I've seen. I just think that's too much. Because like Ja Morant, Anthony Davis has also saw a decrease in production this season, although it's a small sample size because of the injuries. But his superstar play is more recent than Ja Morant's. Before getting traded last year, AD was still averaging 26 and 12 in 42 games with the Lakers. But in his 14 games since joining the Mavs last season, he's down to about 20 points per game. And there's also a well-documented injury history, which is why his nickname is Anthony Day to Davis. You know, we know these things about AD. Even currently, he's missing time with a calf injury, and it was announced preseason that he would need to wear goggles the rest of his career because of a detached retina. It's like, I understand that that may be a freak injury, but unfortunately, it's always something with AD. And that's a huge concern considering the large amount of money that he has remaining on his contract. This season, Anthony Davis is making $54 million. Next year, he's going to be getting $58 million. And then the year after that, at 34 years old, he has a player option worth $62.7 million. And the way things are going now, in terms of his health, he's very likely to accept that player option because you usually don't get more healthy as you get older. So this is certainly a lot of money for AD. But that being said, if all it takes for the Heat to get him is Tyler Herro and 1 first-round pick, I think I would do it if I'm Miami. I really do. This Heat team has shown that they're deep enough to not need Anthony Davis in the regular season. But if he can be healthy in the playoffs, and yes, I understand that's a big if, but if he could be healthy, this team would be unstoppable. And what you gotta remember is sometimes you gotta take risks to win a championship, especially when you're in a spot like Miami where you don't have a ton of assets. You maybe need to go after the star who has some concerns because his trade value is not that high. You gotta take a risk at some point. And I think bringing in Anthony Davis to this current roster may be worth the risk because you would have what I think would be a contending lineup of Davion Mitchell, Norman Powell, Andrew Wiggins, Anthony Davis, and Bam Adebayo. You're telling me that starting lineup isn't worthy of winning at all? We would have undoubtedly one of the best defensive units in NBA history while also putting out 4 guys who could score 20 plus points on any given night. It's not the best spacing lineup I've ever seen, but Bam shooting 34% from 3 this year on 6 attempts is enough to at least keep the defense honest and provide a little bit of spacing, a modest amount of spacing, especially if he continues to improve in that area. But starting wise, you would almost have no weakness outside of some questionable spacing. In terms of the bench, you'd have a very deep bench with Jaime to carry the scoring load. You would still have Drew Smith to ensure 48 minutes of solid point guard play along with Davion. You'd still have Pella to bring all the energy. You'd have Simone to bring the shooting. And then you'd have Khalil Ware to bring the backup size. And then maybe also in this scenario, Jovic now comes off the bench, meaning he gets more of a chance to play with Khalil Ware. And that's when we've seen both those guys be very successful. Or the Heat would still have 1 tradable first-round pick. Maybe more if the NBA gives us a 2027 compensatory pick for Terry Rozier. We know how that would unlock like 4 total tradable firsts. So if the NBA does that, we're in the ball game for a lot more than Anthony Davis. But if not, we still have 2 tradable first-round picks. You send 1 for AD, you would have 1 left. And then you could attach that to any of the young guys to maybe consolidate the roster a little bit and improve in any area even more. So to me, it makes sense just to kind of go in that timeline direction because Anthony Davis is 32 and you already have Norman Powell who's 32, who all Heat fans like a lot. You got Andrew Wiggins who's 30, who's having a really great season. And Bam Adebayo is already 28. It's not like he's a young kid anymore either. We're going to blink and he's going to be 30. So I do think it's very critical that the Heat take advantage of Bam Adebayo's prime, and I do think they can do that with somebody like Anthony Davis. The Heat could shift to a win now timeline to really take advantage of what's shaping up to be a very weak East. So while I certainly believe that Anthony Davis's trade value will be a lot better than this, if his large contract and injury history does scare off other teams, then this is a package I would absolutely consider if the Mavericks get desperate. It's funny when I make these trade videos because as I stated earlier a couple of times, I don't think the Grizzlies or Mavericks would accept either of these packages, but I also know there will be a ton of Heat fans who are going to be yelling, hell no, that's way too much value. Why would the Heat give all of that up for Ja Morant and Anthony Davis? That's why it's funny. There's a lot of interpretation that comes with these trade value videos, so I like to make them just to sort of generate a discussion. So that being said, let me know what y'all think down in the comments below. I'm very curious to hear what you think about Ja Morant or Anthony Davis potentially joining this Miami Heat team, who right now on FanDuel is now up to plus 270 to win the Southeast Division. I knew those odds would get a little bit more juicy with the Heat's loss yesterday and the Magic and Hawks picking up a couple of wins. So odds are getting a little bit better here. If you want to make a little bit more money, there's still a bet I like a lot on FanDuel. Anyways, that's all I got to say for this video. Make sure y'all leave your comments down below, like the video, and subscribe because your support is greatly appreciated. And I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace out, everyone.
Look, pull up in your city tryna get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.